Okay, so the next thing I want to do is work a little bit more on these buttons. Now, it's actually been probably 2 or 3 days since I threw these buttons into that cleaning solution. You know, simple green, grease lightning, and 409, and the hot soapy water. So these buttons have been sitting in there for quite some time, and they're very nice and clean now. I basically just dried these guys off, and so they're nice and clean, ready to be worked on. So the next step I want to do is try to bring some of the color out of the colored buttons. Over time these have been faded. There's some stains, especially like on this blue button here and a couple of the others. So there's stains. A lot of the original color isn't there anymore, so I want to try to bring that out. Now, there is a solution, a liquid solution that's available online called Retro Bright, and what it was designed for is to bring back the original beige or white color that you might find in, say, like Super Nintendo or a computer case, any heavy-duty plastic, or it's even been used on like shoes, where that original beige or white has yellowed over time. So that's what the solution was designed for. Now, another arcade collector, his name's Ty, he's on Clav, he actually used a solution on some original Nintendo buttons, such as these. And he was able to get tremendous results. It brought back a lot of the color, removed a lot of the stains on these buttons, and after he polished them, they looked, way, way, way better. So that's what I want to try here. And basically, the solution for Retro Bright is actually quite simple. It's hydrogen peroxide, which you can find just about anywhere, like a beauty salon. I found mine online. And then you mix that hydrogen peroxide with some sort of like a stain remover, laundry stain remover. I'm using OxyClean here, but you can use just about any sort of similar product. And so those are the heart of the ingredients. That it's basically those two ingredients. Now, you'll see online some guys will use this stuff on shoes, or bigger, much bigger products. Like I was saying, like a computer tower. And so what they'll do is, in order for they can't exactly soak something that big in. Well, I guess they could, but that's going to take a ton of hydrogen peroxide. So what they do is they buy like a gumming agent to kind of gel it up and thicken it so that they can kind of paint it on with like a brush. But for this purpose, since these buttons are so small, it's pretty easy to soak them in the solution. So that's what I'm going to do. Now, I picked up, this is what they call food grade hydrogen peroxide, and this is about the heaviest duty, strongest stuff you can find. This is 35%. And I wanted to find something that was super heavy duty, because the stronger the hydrogen peroxide, at least from what I understand, the more concentrated the hydrogen peroxide, the better reaction and results you're going to get. So this stuff I found on Amazon. I think it was like $40 for a gallon, which is actually pretty good. And then, this OxyClean, this is, like $6 or $7, not too much to it. So what I want to do now is I'm going to start by putting all of the colored buttons into this glass container, because you have to use a glass container. You can't really throw this in something plastic or any other material, because this stuff is so strong, it could just eat right through that. And you can't be too careful. In fact, I'm going to grab I've got some of these rubber gloves that I'm going to use, because this is at a level, once you get past like, 3-6%, I mean, even the light hydrogen peroxide can cause harm to your skin. This stuff can burn you, so you have to be very, very careful. So let me just get all these guys in here. And the reason why I want to use a glass container like this, and one that's much wider than, say, like a deep bowl, is because you have to use this solution under a UV light. And you want that UV light to be able to catch each one of these buttons. If you got something concentrated, it might not penetrate as much. So that's why I'm using more of like a baking dish like this. Obviously, I don't need to concern myself with these black buns because I'm not really trying to bring back the black color. That's not really going to get me very far. All right, so they're all in here. I'm going to grab some of these rubber gloves here. These are supposed to be chemical resistant and, you know, much better than your typical latex glove. They're also a little bit more expensive, but I don't want to take any chances. All right, let's see here. Okay, let me just adjust the camera here so you can see what's going on. This is actually on one of our kitchen countertops. Okay. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is grab hydrogen peroxide here. Let's just open this up. Okay, so I want to pour enough in here that these buns are completely submerged. So I've got to be very, very careful. And I'm going to be pretty generous with stuff because, well, maybe a little bit more. This stuff will evaporate relatively quickly, and therefore I don't want too thin of a coat. I want this stuff to last for several hours. All right, the next thing is to add some OxyClean. Now, this can vary. They say you should put, at least for something this size, probably, you know, maybe a scoop in there. But you can be a little more generous if you want. I'm gonna just put probably one heaping scoop in here. And call that good. And then I'm also going to just use a pencil here and just kind of stir this around a little bit, just kind of get the reaction going a little bit. Okay. And now for the final thing, just to prevent this from evaporating too quickly, I'm going to use some saran wrap and just cover it. That way the UV light will still be able to penetrate it, but this should help prevent it from evaporating too quickly. Now, I don't think I mentioned anything about the UV light yet, so let's talk about that now that we've got this all set to go. So there are two real common ways to get the UV light. The obvious is to use just sunlight. Now, here in Minnesota, it's, you know, February, the heart of winter. It's about one of the coldest months of the year. The weather is super unpredictable. And so not only do I not know if I'm going to get, you know, solid sunlight, but this stuff typically works well in warmer conditions, you know, like warmer than 60 degrees. So sunlight's basically out of the question unless I wanted to wait till summer. So what I'm going to do is use, I picked up one of these reptile lights. You know, people use these for their pets. It's basically, let's see if you can see this. You know, it's like a $15 UV light, and this is actually a really strong UV light. I got this on Amazon. This is their Exoterra Reptile UVB 150. It's basically a 150 watt, excuse me, 150 watt bulb. And so what I do is I set this in a controlled area. I use our office area, and that way it's nice and dark, and I just let this thing sit right above it. This is just a little clamp light. And I just let this sit above it and let that go overnight. And usually within, I want to say 12 to 15 hours, a lot of times this solution's already evaporated. But that's really all you need. Some people say you only need a couple hours. I like to let this thing go as long as possible. So that's what I'm going to do. I won't show you, I won't show you that process, but you get the idea. It's just going to be, this light's just going to be clamped and sitting above this solution for, the next day. So when we come back, I'll show you the results. And one thing to keep in mind is that once this is all done, this solution does leave a little film. Let's see if I have, well, actually this button it leaves kind of a white film around the button. And that's no problem because you can just sand that off and then go ahead and polish it. So anyways, let's get that going, and we'll come back once this is all done. It's actually been the next day after letting these sit in the Retro Bright solution. And as you can see, a lot of these are, I don't know how well you can see this, but there's a white film like I was talking about on all of these buttons. And there's nothing wrong with that because this is going to come right off once we do some sanding. But I let these sit in that solution for a full day, and everything evaporated like I thought it would. And now we're ready to start cleaning these off and polishing them. And the way to do that is to use a drill. I've got some fine sandpaper, and we're going to wet sand these. And then afterwards, I've had really good success using this Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. They call it a color and clarity restorer. Now some guys will use, like, I know Ty, who does a lot of these buttons, he likes to use like a turtle wax, like a cleaning wax, and what was the other? He uses another form of polish as well. So he does, I think he might use Novus, but I'm not sure if I got that correct. But he uses a couple products. He uses a wax and a polish. But I've had pretty good success using this stuff, and it's one less step, but they turn out great. I've done a few of these buttons in the past, and they do look fantastic, a lot better than they did before. So that's the route I go. Everyone's got their own method, but that's a basic rundown. That's the game plan here. So first things first, I'm just going to start with one of these. These are the Crimson buttons, and you wouldn't really know because it's so much lighter after that solution. But I want to focus on just the exposed area. These little threads are really tough to clean up, and you're not going to see this whole bottom part of the button. What you're going to see is this base, this bezel, and maybe a little bit inside here, as well as the plunger. So I'm going to start off by doing one of these, and there are so many buttons here that I'm not going to make you watch each one of these. That would take forever because you can spend 10 to 15 minutes easy on one of these buttons to get it the way you want it to be. So it is a very time-consuming process, but it's definitely worth it. It pays off in the end. So let's start with, I guess I'll use this one here, and let me find a plunger. Let's see here. This one looks like a match. Okay, so I'll use this one. I'm going to put this off to the side over here. And then I've got my little container of water that I'll use for wet sanding. And like I said, this is 800 grit sandpaper, but I'm not going to start with that. I'm going to try something different. Normally I start with like a 600 grit sandpaper, which is really, it's pretty well fine enough. You don't really need to go too much higher. I know some people use like 1,000 or 2,000 grit sandpaper, but this was, you know, stuff I just picked up at Menards, and it'll do the job just fine. But I'm going to start with one of these sanding blocks and see how that goes, because, you know, once you get this drill going, it can get pretty hot, and I thought, well, this would be kind of a good, maybe a good alternative to that. So I'm going to start with this. And this is the extra fine. They don't list an actual grit to these blocks, but this is the finest one that they had. So that's what I'm going to start with. So let's get our drill ready here. All right, so this is just your standard corded power drill. And what I'm going to do here is we'll start with the bezel here. This takes the longest, so. And I've got I think this is like a 2.5, maybe a 3-inch bolt, carriage bolt. And I'm just going to throw a washer on here, throw it inside the button like so, throw another washer on the end, and a nut to hold in place. And this will allow us to throw this into the drill and get this button spinning. I'm going to actually use pliers to just tighten this nut a little bit more. Don't want to do it too much that it might break the button, but just tight enough that it won't come loose in the drill. Because we're going to crank that drill up pretty fast. Actually, let's loosen this a little bit. I want to get this washer centered so it doesn't spin off center. Let's see, that's a little bit better. There we go. I'm just going to tighten this up a little bit. That's good. Okay, so let's throw this into our drill here. That should work. Actually, I'm going to adjust it a little bit. Okay, so that's all set. And now let's get this a little bit wet here. And I'm not going to put a ton of force. I don't want to really, I just want to shave off this very top layer. So let's just start with that. I'm not going to put a ton of force on it. Oops. Actually, I guess I didn't get this quite tight enough. All right, well, let's fix that. Okay, don't think this is going to go anywhere, but we'll have to test it out. A lot of trial and error here. There we go. All right, so I'm just going to start by taking a slight layer off here. Check and work. There you can totally see that that white layer is coming off here. And looking pretty good. Still need to get around this edge here and then on the inside. And once I get kind of a uniform color, then I'll go to the finer grit sandpaper, which will smooth this out a little bit. Oh, that's looking pretty darn nice. This sanding block is really doing a nice job. Before, I only used sandpaper and I was holding it with my hand, and of course it gets hot, you can't go very long, but this is a little bit coarser, and I think that's doing the trick. That's really speeding this up. But I mean, you don't want to go too coarse. You wouldn't want to put like a 60 grit or an 80 grit piece of sandpaper on this thing, because that's really going to take off this plastic and you're going to end up destroying your bun. But if I was to guess, I would say that this is probably more like a 120 or maybe a 220. So I'm just gonna, there's still a couple areas around the edges here that I need to get, and I'm gonna try to get this inside layer too, just a little bit. You're not really gonna see the inside too much, but it is an exposed area, so you wanna try to get as much of that as possible. Again, I'm not concerned about the back here. That can, you know, that can look whatever color it wants to be, because no one's gonna see that, so. All right, a little bit more here. Let's see, yeah. Going to rinse this off here. I see one little line right around this edge here that I still need to get. Otherwise, it's pretty darn close. That's looking pretty good. I want to try to get this inside layer, and for that, I'm not sure. Let's see here. I guess I can try holding this block inside here. Let's see how this works. It's working okay. Again, you don't want to slack on the water. Wet sanding this is really the way to go, because if you get this thing too hot, it's just going to melt the plastic. And luckily, these Nintendo buns are a lot stronger than a lot of the other plastic buns that are used with the softer plastic. This would never work. So luckily, these Nintendo buns are pretty durable. Okay. It's working pretty well. There's still, I don't know how well you can see this. Let's see here. There's still a little bit of white solution, you know, the faded film on the inside there. So I think I can keep working away at that. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect because you're really not going to see that part, but I want to try to get as much of it as I can. That's pretty good. Yeah, I think I'm pretty happy with that. Let's see here. You know, I'm going to actually do one more. It's so close. Come this far, might as well finish it off here. Yeah, I'm going to stop there. Okay, so done with the sanding block. Now let's move on to some 800 grit, and I'm just going to double this over. This stuff we have to kind of go in shorter bursts because this will get hot. So I'm just going to, same thing as before, just to kind of smooth it, make sure that this is really smooth. It'll help also with the polishing. All right, so here we go. It's getting there. Yeah, that's pretty darn smooth. I think one more session here and then we should be done with this portion. And you can see why this takes so long, or can take so long. Grab a towel here and see how we made out. Okay, so let me move this around here. So you can see the original color is definitely coming back, and it looks pretty good, but it's definitely dull from the sanding. And in order to bring out that shine, that glimmer, we're going to have to, this is where the polish comes into play. But the color is looking good. And I think once we throw some of this compound on there, that'll also bring out more of the original color and then also add a gleam and a shine to it. So let's move on to that. Move this stuff out of the way here. And now, like I was saying, I like to use this Meguiar's Ultimate Compound. And this is like $8 for a bottle, and it lasts for quite some time. So what I'm going to use for this is I've got one of these applicator pads, and this, it's just, you could use a cloth. These just, I think they work a little bit easier because you can really lay into them. It's a cushy pad, and you can kind of work it around. But I mean, these are like $1, so I usually just buy a couple packs of them, and they last for a while. So what I want to do is lay on a bunch of this stuff and pretty much just go to town on it. Kind of just like the sandpaper, I'm just gonna maybe rub a little bit on the button and then just go to town on it. And again, I'm usually pretty generous with this stuff. It does tend to pile up in the center here. But I'm just going to throw a little bit more on here. Okay. I'm trying to get the inside of this as well, but it's definitely starting to look nice and polished. You can see the light reflecting off of it, so it's getting a nice glimmer and definitely bringing some of that color back. Almost done here. I think I'm going to do one more little session, and then we should be done with the bezel here, and we can move on to the plunger. And the plunger goes a lot faster because it's more exposed. There's not as many little nooks and crannies. Okay, so now I'm going to take this out of the drill and grab a cloth. Let's take this off. Okay, and I'm going to grab a little cloth here and just kind of wipe this down and work on getting all this polish off. Excessive polish, I should say. And while I'm doing that, I can kind of work it into the bun as well, since it's there already. This is looking pretty darn nice. Now, that looks way, way better than what it did. And that polish definitely brings out a nice finish to it. So, and what I'll do, I'll wash this off. Anyways, we got the bezel done. Looks great. Just going to set that off to the side here. So now, let's do this guy. And with these plungers, they'll fit right inside your drill. And again, you don't want like a super death grip on these because it is just plastic. Just enough to have a good grip that it won't loosen up. So let's come back here. Back to our block. And I mean, this thing looks, I mean, you can't even tell that this was once a crimson bun. It looks pink, it looks white. It looks nothing like it should, but it's just amazing how taking that layer off brings it back. All right, so here we go. Okay, just gotta get the inside. I use a corner of this for that. Okay, a little bit more. There's that very, very center is always the trickiest part to get. Usually you end up with like a little speck in the center, which, you know, isn't the end of the world, but it's frustrating. So I'm just going to keep working here. That's pretty good. Let's get the edges here. Need a little bit more on the sides. Otherwise, it's coming off real nicely. Real exciting stuff, huh? Can you imagine doing this with all these other buttons? Yeah. That's why I'm not going to make you sit through and watch all this. You're probably already skipping through it. Okay. That's looking pretty nice. All right, now let's go to our 800 grit here. Oh yeah, much better. These plungers are so much simpler than those bezels. Let me pull this out so you... Oops, there we go. Yeah, much better. And you can see the difference in color from the stem here. Much, much better. Actually, you know what? I see there's a little strip of light color there that I want to get rid of. So let's work on that. Much better. Yeah, that's gone now. Okay. Well, now let's polish this guy. All right, I'm going to go to the compound here. Definitely don't need to use as much on this because it's just a solid part, easy to access all the sides. I feel like more is wasted on the bezels because of the odd shape. All right, here we go. That's probably good enough. And again, I'm going to wash both of these pieces. But just for now, so I can see the results, I'm just wiping them down quickly to see if my work's paying off or not. Yeah, that looks really nice. Just comparing it with this guy. That looks really nice. I'm going to wash these off, and then I'm going to proceed to do the rest of these guys. And yeah, I'm not going to make you guys sit through all this. So maybe I'll speed it up, or maybe I'll just stop recording. But anyways, when we come back, we'll have all these guys done. So, alrighty, let's get to work. Okay, we're back, and holy crap, did this take me a long time. It's actually been probably a day or two, and I finally got through all these buttons, and this is no exaggeration. I'll bet this took me 16 hours, maybe 17. There were 31 buttons total, and we did one together, and that took, oh, I don't know, 30 to 40 minutes, and I went a little bit slower because I wanted to show you every step of the way. And so I tried to burn through all these buttons, but they still took me 20 to 30 minutes each. So yeah, I'll bet I spent about 15 hours. It was long, it was tedious, but I will say it was definitely worth it. These things turned out great. And the Retro Bright experiment, I would say overall was a success. It wasn't completely effective on certain colors. So for instance, like these crimsons, it didn't really do a whole lot to them. And I think, it could be one of two things. One, it could be that it just doesn't react well with this color. The other thing could be that, I think most of the crimsons that I have were in pretty decent shape to begin with. So I don't know really how much of a color restoration potential there was. So that was one thing. But overall, it really did a good job, especially I would say on these blues and also on the purples. I would actually say that the Retro Bright worked the best on purple. And I'm not sure why that is, but I'll show you a couple of before and after pictures side by side. It was just a night and day difference. I just couldn't believe it. I mean, these things, they looked, these two especially, they looked almost pinkish. They were so washed out and faded. And that Retro Bright just brought them back tenfold. Now, the two over here, these are actually new old stock ones that I acquired. And again, it worked fantastic, but these were more dark and washed out. They weren't so much of a tinted color. So I don't think it worked quite as well on, at least on these, versus these two purples. And I'm not sure why that is, but I mean, it's still a 9-day difference. They look fantastic, but it might just be that they weren't in the same condition that these were. So, but it really worked well on the purples and on the blues. I would say it also worked pretty well on these greens. The yellows maybe a little bit, but again, it really varied depending on the color. So it was very interesting to see that. And of course, I didn't do anything with the blacks. I just polished these. But overall, they turned out great. Now, like I said, I did do the Retro Bright on these new old stock purples. And then, let's see, I did not on the new old stock yellow, as well as these new old stock crimsons. So the only thing I did with these new old stock buttons was polish them up. And, that's kind of for obvious reasons. I'm not going to Retro Bright these if they already look brand spanking new like they are. So the only reason I did that with these purples is that they look substantially faded. And I knew that I could get something out of them by Retro Brighting them. So overall, I would say that was a success. And now they're all done, thank God, because that was so tedious. I did not enjoy that at all. It was nice to see them done, but it was just such a pain, sanding that off. And that actually brings up a good point. Let's see, let's find some good examples here. Maybe, so obviously the tops and everything look fantastic because that's the part that I was concerned about. That's the part I was going to see. So I did a lot of sanding up here to just get that white film off that was left from a Retro Bright. But on the bottoms here, you can see that film is still on here. It's that real thin whitish film that the Retro Bright leaves. And I simply just left that on there because, one, I'm not going to see this part of the button, and two, I didn't want to risk damaging these threads by sanding. So not a big deal. And of course, none of these are perfect, but they're, night and day better than they were. Miles and miles ahead. So anyways, just thought I'd mention that because, you may wonder, well, why is it look so whitish under here. That's why. It's the retro bright. Okay, so these are done. Now let's talk about all the other things that were going on at the same time. You know, we did that metal rescue with a bunch of the metal parts. We also painted the monitor bezels as well as the PCB holder. So let me get the wide angle lens on and I'll show you all of that stuff. Okay, so before we got all these buttons done, we did a bunch of other stuff and everything turned out fantastic. I'll just start over here. You know, last time we painted the PCB holder, just threw some black on it, and that turned out pretty darn nice. I actually really liked the matte finish on here, and I was getting really tired of that mix of red and blue spray paint that was on there. So that turned out nice. The semi-gloss that we threw on these PCB holders also turned out really nice. I really liked the sheen to this, and I really think that that's going to look slick on those monitors once we get those in place. I think that that's going to really look sharp on there. So those all turned out fantastic. Not too much exciting going on there. But here's where things get real interesting. Now, last time we threw a bunch of parts into a bath of metal rescue. And that stuff is just amazing. Every time I use it, it blows my mind. So, for instance, here are the three plates, assemblies for the joysticks. And you remember last time, there was a ton of rust around the hole here for where the joystick slides through. And that is just completely gone. Same with the other side here. And where it's really convenient is inside these two plates, because these are welded together. You can't separate these unless, you know, you take some drastic matters. But it's nearly impossible to really clean if there's any rust in there. And so the nice thing about that metal rescue is you just, you know, let these sit in there, and that just takes care of it. You know, it's just a peace of mind thing. So there is literally no more rust on these plates, and they look great. The only thing I did that you didn't see is on all these metal pieces, I usually just throw a real light once over of polish just to prevent the, you know, kind of seal them and prevent, you know, rust from forming again. So those turned out great. These are all of the button holders. And once again, same thing. All of the rust is gone. And some of these were really terrible. I don't know if you recall, maybe I can throw up an image of a couple of them if I have some. But I mean, there were some of these that just looked, I mean, they looked completely rusted and like tinted. Just gross. And that metal rescue, you know, took care of all of that. It's just fantastic. And let's see here. I also threw in all of these micro switches. And like I mentioned before, the nice thing about that metal rescue is it doesn't harm anything other than rust. So you can literally throw plastic parts like these in there and it's not going to harm them at all. In fact, it didn't even take off any of the paint. The lettering on these micro switches is still there. And with something small like this, where you got these little tiny tabs, that's really, really difficult and tedious to get the rust off. I mean, yeah, you can take like a, I don't know, like a Q-tip or a real thin piece of sandpaper and kind of work it in between these tabs. But, you know, if you've got 30, 40 of these micro switches, you're going to be doing that for hours. So it's just so nice to be able to throw this stuff in there, not worry about it, and it just does that for you. You don't have to do any real labor. So that stuff worked fantastic. And then I also threw in, well, actually, I took all of the small joystick parts and I threw them into a bath of brake clean. Because if you remember, you know, these sticks really haven't been rebuilt since, what, the 80s maybe? So they still had a ton of gunk and grime on them, mostly old lubrication, like old oils and stuff. They were just gross. I mean, they were slimy, all of that, they were basically black. All that stuff would come off on your hands, and it was just like a sludge. And that brake clean just works fantastic for taking this kind of stuff off. Yeah, you know, you can spray these down and wipe them down, but I found after I rebuilt some trackballs that actually just soaking them in that brake clean works fantastic, and they'll take off most of it for you. In fact, all I did was just rinse these parts off, and there's nothing left to them. Nothing comes off. There's no more residue on them. So that was a complete success as well. These springs especially turned out great. I mean, these were black. It's just astonishing how well that stuff works. So don't be afraid to soak the parts in this stuff, especially where, you know, brake clean is pretty relatively inexpensive. A giant, you know, gallon jug of Metal Rescue I think runs about 20 to 25 bucks depending on where you get it. And again, I don't know if that's something that's sold just in the Midwest area or if that's all across the country. But if you find that stuff, pick it up. It works fantastic. I know there's some knockoff brands. I've heard of like Evapo Rust, and there's a few other knockoff companies that produce a similar product. So by all means, pick that stuff up. It works great. So that's everything up till this point. So now let's proceed further. And the next thing I want to do is finish rebuilding these joysticks. And then I picked up a new tool that I want to use to clean some other metal parts. So why don't we get to it? Let's start with the joystick and go from there. Okay, let's start with restoring these joysticks here. And the first thing I want to do is actually work on the shafts of the joysticks themselves. Now, we did soak these in brake cleaner, and it took off, you know, pretty much all of the gunk and grime. But there is, you know, there's a little bit of, well, I don't know what you'd call it, residue, or they're not very clean as far as appearance goes, and I'd like to kind of shine them up. So the first thing I want to do is kind of get rid of any of these, you know, there's some black marks here. This looks, it just looks like it's been tarnished. So what I want to do is try to sand all that off and then maybe polish it a little bit. Nothing too extensive, but in order to do this, I'm going to use a drill. And I am just gonna throw the shaft into the drill here. Try to keep it as low as possible, but not you know, the very, very tip of it so that this thing would fall out. But you know, it's in there pretty good. And then the next thing I want to do is get my sandpaper, and instead of just running this dry, I'm gonna use some water here and just wet this up a little bit. First thing I want to do is I want to fold this so that, you know, so that I can wrap it around the shaft. So I'm just going to do that. Kind of maybe something like this here. That should work. All right, so I'm going to just wet my sandpaper here. That's pretty good. Let's wrap it around the shaft here. And I just want to hold it tight. You know, the drill will do most of the work, so let's see here. Okay. Oh yeah, that seems to be working pretty well. I need to wet this up again. So one thing about wet sanding is that you have to constantly keep that sandpaper wet, otherwise it kind of defeats the purpose. And this is 600 grit sandpaper. You could use probably something even a little bit finer or coarser. You know, it doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not worried about really scratching this up. I just want to get everything off of the shaft so that when you throw some polish on there, it'll look nice and clean. All right, here we go. Okay, I'm just going to wipe this down to kind of check my work. And that's looking quite a bit better. If I compare the two here, yeah, this one's in a lot worse shape. We're getting there. I think I need to sand a little bit more. You know, it's just another one of those things where it's just a matter of time. Okay, let's get the bottom part here. Actually, I'm gonna double this over one more time. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's a lot better. I just need to get a little bit more, and then I think we'll be done with this one for now. Okay. This thing does get a little warm. But yeah, that is way better than what it was. If you compare them, I don't know how well you can see this, but I mean, this guy is much better than it was before, like this one. So, all right, I'm gonna go ahead. I'll probably speed this up. I'm just gonna do the other two shafts here, and then after that, we'll polish them. Okay. Okay, these turn out very nice, and you know, that's a fairly simple process. The drill does all the work, but it really pays off. These are a lot shinier, they're a lot cleaner than they were, and I think once we polish these, they'll look real nice. So, I actually got pretty dirty. That stuff just kind of flies everywhere, the little specks from the sandpaper and the dirt that was on these shafts. But okay, so now let's throw some polish on actually the tops first. I've got some of that Meguiar's polish that we used for the buttons. Well, you know, actually, I'm going to use that cleaner wax because, you know, this is black. So, I mean, the other polish is more meant to restore color. And, you know, you're not really going to restore a black, so to speak. So that cleaner wax should probably work a little bit better. And I just want to throw a quick polish on these. Again, these aren't in very bad shape. They're not in like dying need of polish. But since we're going through all the hassle of polishing the shaft, might as well do that with the ball tops. So let me go grab some of that cleaner wax, and we'll polish these. All right, got my Meguiar's cleaning wax here, and I've got a little applicator pad. Let's move some of this stuff out of the way here. Actually, I'm going to go toss this stuff away. All right, so let's throw one of these bad boys in the drill again. And some of this cleaner wax on my pad here. I always like to be generous on this stuff. That's probably way too much, but whatever. It is what it is, and I don't think it's going to hurt. Excuse me. All right, so just going to get the ball top soaked in this stuff, and then pretty much same drill as before. Hot, no pun intended. All right. Oops. It'd help if I actually tighten this thing. Okay. Just going to do a little bit more here. Just a dab. That should do it. And let's just wipe this off and see how it looks. Oh yeah. Looks nice and clean. Again, it's not like we're using turtle wax or anything to get a super shine, but it is noticeably better. I don't know how well it shows up, but it does have a much better look than these other guys. So that one's done. Let's just do the same for these other two. All right, let's see how we did here. Yeah, these look pretty good. Now, this isn't the same, what we're doing here isn't essentially the same as, say, if we were using like a turtle wax or something that's meant to add a real gloss and sheen to the ball tops. The whole purpose of this is mostly just to clean and then add kind of a protective coat. And so that's essentially what this sort of polish does, or this cleaner wax. So, we're not going to get the same results as something that's really meant to add a layer of gloss, which I'm not too concerned with. I mean, these already have a sheen to them, but I just wanted to kind of clean and protect them. Now, if we were to really go all out, you can always use like Novus. There's a whole 3-step process. There's Novus 1, 2, and 3, which really thoroughly cleans and adds that gloss element to it. But I mean, these look pretty decent already, so I'm not too concerned with that. I don't really think it needs that, but they are nice and clean now, so I'm pretty happy there. So next, let's throw a quick little polish on the shaft here of all three of these, and it's kind of the same process. We're going to use, I think I'm just going to use some of this this silver polish that I used on like the chrome legs and stuff before. Seems to work pretty well, and I think it'll do the job nicely. So I'm actually going to, this is the applicator pad that comes with this stuff, but I think I'm just gonna rub a bunch of it onto this other pad, because this sponge is really saturated. It's not very thick, and if I run this in a drill, I don't really think it's going to hold up well. All right, just do something like that. And again, I'm not trying to make this thing to the point where I can see my reflection in them. I just want there to be a layer on this to protect the shaft. And hopefully in the process it will, give a nice little shine to it. But, it doesn't have to be, ridiculously awesome. Most people aren't going to really notice this. All right. All right, so let's see what happened here. I'm supposed to actually rinse this off with this sort of polish. And I didn't throw a ton on here. I'm just want to compare the two here. But there actually is a noticeable difference. So maybe I'll do a little bit more on this and then I'll rinse it off and then move on to these other two. Why don't we do that? Okay, we're back. We are all done with all three of these, and they look fantastic. They turned out really nice. Let's see here. And of course, I'm sure it's tough to see, but they do look really nice and clean and shiny, and yeah, they're where I want them to be. So let's see. Next step is going to be, let's work on these bases. Now, these are done. I mean, we had them soaking in brake clean and also metal rescue, and so they really have been thoroughly cleaned, and I did run some polish on them just to protect them. But there is some elements, particularly this ball that's inside here where the shaft slides through, and this little ball I've noticed on these three just recently is still a little bit dirty. So before we proceed any further, I want to clean that up. So I've got some of these heavier duty little brushes. They sell these at like Menards or Home Depot as a set, and these work really well. And so what I want to do is grab some brake clean, because this stuff really does work well for cleaning. And for whatever reason, when I had these soaking, that part either got missed or just didn't work very well while these were soaking. Okay, well, it looks like my memory card filled up and I wasn't paying attention, but didn't miss much. All I did was I took all three of these plates, these bottom assemblies for the joystick, and there's a little ball in the center here. And for whatever reason, when I soaked these in brake clean and also that metal rescue, for whatever reason, it didn't do a really good job of penetrating this area here, and so these were still a little bit dirty, and that's kind of a crucial element because that's what the shaft of the joystick rests in and moves around. So all I did was I took some brake clean here and just kind of soaked those parts while making sure I didn't get it all over this piece because this has already been polished and I don't want that brake clean to take any of that off. So these are all clean now, which is good. I used one of these brushes here, have some really strong bristles on them, and that works really well for cleaning these areas out. This is a little 3-piece set you can get at like Menards or Home Depot for just a few bucks, but I use these all the time. They're great. So anyways, that's done. And now comes the fun part of reassembling these and also lubricating them. And for lubricating, I use this stuff on trackballs all the time. This is called Tri-Flow Superior Lubricant. And I almost swear by this stuff exclusively now. It really gets in there. It's not gummy like like a 3-in-1 oil would be, or even even WD-40 to some extent is terrible, especially with like bearings and what have you. But this stuff works fantastic. And so that's what I'm going to use here. And let's just start. I also brought one of my already restored and finished joysticks, and this I'm just going to use as a reference just to make sure. There's not a whole lot to these, but I just want to double check that I've got everything in order and the way it should be. So I'm just going to set that off to the side here. And first things first, I want to just lubricate all of the individual parts a little bit. We'll lubricate them again once they're all assembled, but for the time being, I want to make sure that each of the major parts that gets moved around has an adequate amount of lubrication. So that's going to be the shafts, which looks. Let me pull these back so that you can see. Then we've got the sleeves for the shaft. I'm going to get these names all wrong, but these little pieces that sit, let's see, right at the top. It basically rests somewhere in here. And then, actually, it sits right below this top piece here inside. So you've got that, these sleeves, and the springs. These are the major components that come into friction and contact with each other. So they definitely need some sort of lubrication. Now, you don't get a lot in these small little bottles, but it is plenty, believe me. So I'm just going to spray a little bit on there. Let me just... get all these guys. Get these guys. If this stuff wasn't so expensive, I'd probably soak these parts in this stuff too. I really like to soak things in liquid. I just think it does especially like brake clean, it does a tremendous job on its own. Okay, that's all we need for those. I'm gonna let that sit for just a second here. Okay, now, I also want to, actually, I missed these areas here. Okay, actually, I'll probably get the underside a little bit. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So now we can start assembling these, but before that, there is another piece that goes on top here. If you look at this completed one, there's this black plate up here that's used for mounting the joystick, and also a little dust washer around here. So that goes on top of everything here. And I want to be sure I get those on there first. I've got, these are actually new old stock ones, so they really don't need to be cleaned. They look pretty brand spanking new. But I've only got 2 of them, so I do have some used ones over here. Let me just grab one. And also the dust washer. And these do need to be cleaned. So I'm just going to use, this is basically a generic simple green. I was too cheap to buy the real legit stuff, I guess. But let me grab, this stuff works just fine. All right, so I'm just going to spray this down as soon as I turn it on. And I'm just going to use a real light Scotch-Brite pad here. This thing's got some gunk on it. And I just want to get that off. Nothing too fancy here. It's mostly right around the center. Same with the back side. All right, let's wipe this thing down here. And that's looking much better. That's all it really needs, just a real light cleaning. And actually, yeah. And yeah, let's clean this dust washer too. Okay, that's that. Let's move on. So I'm just going to start with one here and kind of assemble the whole thing, and then I'll do the other 2 and not make you sit through that. So got to get all these pieces here. And actually I do need to grab the micro switches so I can throw those on here. 1 second, be right back. Okay, so I've got these little sleeves, plastic sleeves along the, what did you call this, the collar of the joystick. So got those all in place. It's kind of the first step. Then the next thing is going to be to grab one of our bezels here, or not bezel, plastic mounting plate. Throw that on top here. And grab one of our dust washers. So this slides through here. And then we've got our little spring, what would you, holder? One of these little pieces here. Okay, let's throw our spring on. Then we put the call this a collar on there for the with the E-clip. Now this is kind of where it gets tricky. Let me grab one of the E-clips here. So you have to hold this down and then slide the E-clip on. And I should have, you know, I need to grab, I always use a needle nose pliers for this. Let me go grab that. I'll be right back. Okay, grab my needle nose pliers here. This makes it really a lot simpler to throw this E-clip on here. Okay, so I'm holding the spring down, and then I'm just going to take my needle nose pliers. There we go. So there's our joystick. We still have to put the actuator, the 8-way actuator, or restrictor plate, sorry, not actuator. I get all these terms confused. We got to throw this on here, and then our micro switches. So there's just a few screws for that. Let me grab. And actually these screws, there goes my phone. The screws for these are really weak. They're these really tiny screws. Let me show you one of them. It's this little guy here. And for some reason or another, they're really weak. Meaning they strip really easily. Like when I took these apart, there was, I think, 3 or 4 of them that were completely stripped. In fact, I had to use a drill to get them out. So I went to Ace Hardware today and picked up some extras of those. Hopefully those work better. So let's get our restrictor plate on here. Like so. Need to grab some more tools actually. Second here. Should be like that. Grab some more of these little tiny screws that are super easy to lose. Have to be so careful with these not to strip them. I don't know, something about these original screws, because the new ones I got don't strip this easy. Maybe that's just a sign of age. I mean, I guess these screws are 30 plus years old. Okay, that's good. Joystick centers real nicely. Which is a good sign. So let's get the micro switches on here. And actually we need these little plates, these little guys here that hold the micro switches in place. And let's see here. Remember how these sit on here. I think we do one like this. Yeah. All right, let me just get a few more of these and some screws. This is where it really pays to use a little Ziploc bag to keep all these parts, because it's so easy to lose track of what screws go to what, and where things get misplaced. It's real easy to lose sight of that. Okay, I think the trick is to actually throw a screw through here first. Like that, kind of sandwich it in. And then we should be home free. Something like that. Hopefully you can see this. I realize that I start getting into this and I'm not too conscious of where the camera is. Okay, that's in place. Let's get the other ones. These are such small pieces. I know it's tough to see, but I'm just taking one of these, taking these screws here and throwing it through the micro switch and onto one of these metal pieces. It just makes it a lot easier than to mount it on the bottom here. Okay. That one's good. All right, two more here. Some of these tabs get bent way out of whack, and I'm not sure exactly why that is. But if you're careful with the needle and nose pliers, it seems to work pretty well to bend them back without breaking them. Okay. All right, one more to go here. All right. Last micro switch. This is where it's kind of tedious, as you can see. Tedious and not too exciting. All right, let's see here. Oh yeah. And that thing centers perfectly. That's nice. Now, before I forget, let's go through one more time, now that's all together, and lubricate everything a little bit. I'm just gonna lift up the dust washer here just a little bit so I can get the nozzle down. Get some down here. There goes my phone. Also get the bottom and inside where the spring is. That's pretty good. Yeah, that is a nice joystick. Okay, so I'm going to go through, do the same thing for these other two. I'll just speed this up, and when I come back, we should be done with these joysticks and we'll move on. Okay, we're done. And these turned out fantastic. You know, it was a little monotonous work like all this stuff typically is, but I mean, these are a night and day difference than what they were. They, you know, they're the closest thing to new that that I'm going to get. But you know, everything centers perfectly. If I move it off in one direction, it comes right back, and that's really what you want. There's a good connection with micro switches. When I spin them around, it's hitting all 8 ways. So, I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. These are perfect. So now that we're done with these, let's move on to the next little task, which involves a new tool I got. So let me go grab that and we'll get started. Okay, so I picked up a tumbler. These have been getting really popular with arcade and pinball restorations. People use these to clean all of their parts, like their little metal parts, bolts, you know, what have you that has like rust and dirt on them. And these are used more commonly in the gun hobbyist world, where guys that do their own reloading use them to clean the brass. So they also serve to clean, you know, any other little tiny metal parts quite well. And basically what this does is it vibrates and it causes whatever media you're using to circulate around the, you know, the little metal parts. So I've got a bunch of stuff that I want to throw in there. Most of them are, let's see here, let me find some real rusty ones. I've got a bunch of these control panel bolts that have gotten really rusted. I mean, some of these, I don't know how well you can see this. Some of these are just gross. There's all kinds of rust on the top. And this is what holds the control panels in place, holds the control panel overlays in place. And so these are very visible, and I want to get all of that rust off of these, since there are so many of them. And the easiest way would be something like this. I figured, you know, you could take sandpaper and just sand the tops of these down, but you know, I've got like 30 or 40 of these, so that's going to take a very long time. And then on top of that, I figured I would throw some other stuff while I'm at it in there. I've got these coin return bezels, and also the pieces for the reject slot where the coins, you know, return out. So these are for the coin slots, and then for the return reject area, these are the bezels and the flaps. So I want to throw all of these in here, and first what I'm going to do is, I've got my media here. This is just your crushed walnuts that you would find in your pet store. I got these at PetSmart. This is 10 quarts for, I think I only spent like maybe 12 bucks or something on this, so killer deal. If you buy the actual media, you're going to spend a lot more. If you buy the actual media that they sell with these, it's usually a lot more expensive. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to fill this up pretty close to the top. I just need to grab a scissor here. Okay. And this is the first time I've used one of these things, so it'll be an experience for both of us. Hopefully a good one. All right. This is a really big bag. And this tumbler here, I actually bought at Cabela's. You know, they're kind of an outdoors shop, a lot of hunting and fishing stuff. So it makes sense that they'd sell these there. But this one got really, really good reviews. And there's another one that's been really common that's sold on Amazon. I think it's called like a Franklin or something like that. It's a blue one, about the same size. And that one also got really good reviews, but it's recently jumped up in price. I think Amazon themselves quit selling it, and so there's third-party sellers on there now that have really boosted the price. It went from being sold for like under 40 bucks to now, you know, it's like 50 or 60 bucks. It's just ridiculous. So this one was about 50 bucks. And one thing that, other than the really, really good reviews that drove me to it, was that it's got a great warranty. It's got a lifetime warranty on all the plastics. And then on the motor itself, it's got a 3-year warranty. So even if this thing conks out, it's got a killer warranty, and I should be able to replace it. Okay, so I should probably put a little bit more in there, but I think I'm going to first put my parts in there, and then maybe I'll fill up the top layer. So first, we've got all of our bolts. Let's drop all these in here. Okay, and I've also got a few other really rusty screws I'm going to throw in there since I'm doing this already. Then I've got the flaps for the coin return, the bezels, and then the coin slot bezels. Again, these aren't terrible, but you know, if this can help them in any way, I might as well, since I've got all this capacity here. Then these are actually for the chrome legs. Now, I was going to take off these washers, but they're a real pain in the, you know what, to get off. So I'm just going to see if it does any, if it really makes a difference. I'm just going to leave them on. I think that this is a fine enough material that I should be able to get in there, but you know, worst case, it doesn't do a great job, but I don't really see these anyways. So that's all good. I haven't decided if I should put the other ends of the bolts. I'm just going to leave them out. You don't see these and they're not really that rusty. So I'm just going to put another little layer on top here. There's no line or indicator about how full this needs to be, but it's probably not a good idea to keep this all the way to the top, I would imagine. That's probably good. Now the other thing that a lot of people do is they'll throw some polish in here. And they'll throw some polish in here that'll help along the process with cleaning up these parts. And a lot of times people throw some Novus in there, or they have their own magic formula. I don't really have too many other polishes left. I need to pick up some more stuff, but I do have some Brasso left over. And you know, what the heck, I'm going to throw some of this this Right Silver Cream in there since I've been using that. But you know, there's not much left of either of these, so what the hell. I don't think it's really going to harm anything. If anything, it's going to help. So let's dump this in here. I'm actually just going to unload this bottle. Okay. And let's see. I need something to scoop this out with. Let me grab like a plastic spoon or something. This will be a good experiment. Okay. Just wipe my hand off here. All right, then I think it's just pretty straightforward. It's a matter of, let's put our lid back on. Clamp this guy down here. Make sure this is nice and tight. I do like how it's got this big nut on here. Some of the other ones, you hear stories about them coming loose, vibrating loose. So that should be good enough. And then let's flip on the switch here and see what happens. Hey, look at that. That is pretty darn cool. It's nice and quiet too. Now I'm not going to leave it here obviously on this table. I'm going to put it in another room on the floor. But yeah, it seems to be doing its magic. And the ETA on this is kind of up in the air. It's really a matter of how long do you want it to sit until the parts are clean. So that could be a couple hours, could be a day, could be a couple days. I guess I'm gonna let this sit overnight, check it in the morning, and go from there. So why don't I go sit this down, and when we come back, it'll be the next day. Okay, we're back. It's the next day. This has been running for a good 24 hours at least. So plenty of time to see what's happened here, what this tumbler has done to all of these bolts and miscellaneous parts. Hopefully it took off the majority of the rust, and I think it has. Some people leave these things go for days, and I'm not sure if that's really necessary here, but we'll find out. Okay, I had to stop for a second because I spilled a bunch of this stuff all over the place. Lesson learned, I guess. So I got a better plastic bag here that I'm just gonna rest the strainer on and do a little bit of this at a time. Now, you can buy a sifter for this. I think that's what it's called. Kind of like a strainer that basically allows you to just flip this over, and it seems fairly simple enough, but I was too cheap to buy that. In retrospect, maybe I should have, but I think this will work. Like I said, lesson learned. But if you want to see me spill all this stuff, skip ahead to the very end of the video after the logo at the end. So I'll have that in there. All right. I guess I underestimated how heavy some of these parts are. Okay. Yeah, this works much better. And let me tell you, if you have a garage, do this in the garage. I got this stuff all over carpet, and it is a pain to vacuum. Okay, let's do some more here. Should be everything. This thing got a little caked around the center here. I'm sure that's from a combination of the media with the polish. Not sure which one or both, but just get that out of here. I'll probably have to wash this thing. Okay. Feel like I'm prospecting here. Take some of these pieces out here. This stuff's looking pretty darn nice. Again, I'm sure you can't see this very well. I'll do some close-ups of this so that you can see what this did, but so far I'm very impressed, especially with these bezels. Just going to take out these bigger parts here so I can get the rest of this sifted, strained. Wow, that's pretty nice. Even with these washers on, it looks like it did a good job. Wow, these bolts look fantastic. Can't imagine hand sanding all of these. That'd be a real pain. This is so much nicer. Wow. Get the last of these out of here. Okay, let's just all right, let me move this stuff out of the way and we'll have a glance here. So these bezels, these coin slot bezels look fantastic. Now, they looked pretty good before, but there was where I'm really noticing a difference is not so much on the front, it's on the back. There were some areas that had a little bit of rust and just weren't that shiny, and that really got in those areas that I couldn't. And this looks fantastic. Yeah, these look great. And there was also some areas in these little grooves here, and that took care of it. That really made a difference. These guys look great. Awesome. These are the coin reject or return flaps. Again, super polished. Love it. Now these bolts for the chrome legs actually look remarkably good. Now, like I expected, it didn't get everything off because I left these washers on. They were a real pain to remove, and so I wasn't too concerned. But I mean, they did a number. That tumbler really did a number on it, and there's not a ton there. It does look a lot. These look a lot better. But again, I'm not too concerned because you don't really see these. Now, the stuff that we do see. Let's look at these bolts here. Wow, these look brand new. This is just amazing. I mean, these were really bad. They looked absolutely terrible. Okay. But I mean, these are just polished. I mean, they look like they just came out of the store. That is just amazing. These are going to look really sharp on that control panel. Yeah, I'm definitely persuaded. I buy into the whole tumbler thing. And, you know, it's a very small investment for very minimal work that does an amazing job. Sweet. Okay, so I think I'm going to stop here. Hope this was a little interesting and you found it helpful. Thanks for subscribing and watching, and I'll see you the next time. Okay. Just take my time here. Ah, crap. That wasn't too smart.